In an ever-evolving digital landscape, for your business to thrive, you must adapt or die. Welcome to Marketing in the Age of AI, the podcast helping you harness the power of AI and marketing tools to revitalize and grow your business. And now here's your host, marketing expert and author of Authentic Marketing in the Age of AI, Emanuel Rose.
Welcome to this episode of Marketing in the Age of AI. Today, we have the opportunity to speak to a very accomplished author, speaker, and he says philanthropist. I say humanitarian. We might get into the weeds on that one too. But I want to welcome to the show, Rodric Lenhart.
Hey, Emanuel. Thanks for having me, man.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk today. Where in the world are you calling in from today?
At the moment, in the mountains of Virginia.
Very nice. Well, a little bit more about your background so we understand who you are, Rodric.
Sure. So lifelong entrepreneur. The long and short of it, I've started a dozen different 7- and 8-figure companies over my quote unquote career. Sold the last one a couple years ago, and that's when I moved. I wrote the book. I went to Brown for my ICF and professional coaching, started the foundation, sent a student leader abroad, and all the things that turned into $1 million flip-flops. So now my focus I call it chapter 2, is helping owners reclaim their time. You know, while I built all those businesses, I visited 60 countries on 6 continents, and I went to the Super Bowl and the World Series and F1 and Daytona and, the things I wanted to do in my life without hoping that when I'm 65 or 70, I can buy back my health or my family members or my friends.
Right.
So letting people know that that's possible and giving them a solid roadmap forward on how to achieve that. That's what I like to do.
So it sounds like you're a man that understands leverage and assigning tasks to other people and using software to its greatest capabilities. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it comes down to automation, delegation, and communication, right? So
Very nice.
Certainly what we're going to talk about today is a big piece of that now.
Yeah. So then what are you noticing about how, this obviously a massive number of marketing tools that have hit the marketplace in the last year and a half? What are you seeing about how you're adopting tools and what that's changing for you?
Personally, I use AI more for research. I've never
Mhm.
used it to write for me, but even silly things like looking for a part number for something, instead of me trying to Google and go through 20 websites, one of the GPTs will tell me exactly what that part number is. So
Yeah, for sure.
But
Which one do you like the most right now?
I use 3 different ones. I use Claude, Navia, and just plain old Chat GPT.
Yeah.
But I use them all for different things too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Have you tried Perplexity yet?
Negative.
Okay, so that's one that is coming into the space of replacing Google as the search engine, or the generative engine is what they're calling it, and GEO is the marketing side of that, which is the generative engine optimization. And so there's this whole big gray area that's developed because of that, because of the way you're using the GPTs, which is awesome, right? To go and scrape and do the work and come back with lots of different options than you would wasting your time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but there's a lot of other things. Specifically, I work with a lot of home builders. I was in real estate and development construction for a long time, and the way they can utilize AI just to build out a marketing plan, build out a 12-month email plan, things that they would have had to have gone to a marketing professional for before.
Sure.
They can knock out in relatively short order and at least get something that's fill in the blanks that will serve the purpose.
Yeah, and I think that's good, and it shows how like a solopreneur, an operator who's an inexperienced marketing person can at least wrap their hands around it, and then have some directionality to then take to somebody and say, how do we implement this? Because it's usually not in their best interest to become the marketing expert. Usually they're trying to run their own business, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And things like, a lot of my guys, they'll do Instagram stories or Instagram videos, or they'll be on TikTok, and just a simple prompt like, what are best practices for getting high engagement on X platform, not
Yeah.
necessarily X now that it's X, but and just having it spit out, so that they have some idea instead of just going into it blind. I think again, using it for research has been really valuable of late.
Yeah, for sure. Research, and then also like even content calendars and some of that structural activity that we have to do on a consistent basis.
Yeah.
What else are you seeing from what your coaching students are doing with the AI tools?
On the builder side, anyway, there's a lot of where it's taking over estimating time on things, bidding jobs, forecasting, run rate on money. There's ways to plug that in that used to take hours that you can do in 10 minutes now, and it's learning as you go. So in my effort as a coach to help people reclaim their time, certainly
Yeah,
it's a valuable tool in that respect.
yeah, very nice. And so, what are kind of the top three ways that people can reclaim their time, according to Rodric?
So when you start with me, whether it's one-on-one coaching, or I did a workshop last week for a bunch of folks all over the country, understanding where your time is going. And it's like all things, Emmanuel, it's simple, and that's why we don't do it, and that's why we don't get the results. So we've got a sheet called the timestamp shakedown, and it's you chart your week, and you're adding, what would it cost me to have somebody else do this? And then I add in another piece of it I call energy level. So there's things, I'll go back to the builders example, but I loved walking houses when they were in framing. So should my project manager do that? Absolutely. But I enjoy it. So it fills me up from an energy perspective because I just dig that part of the process. So charting all of those things, and then figure out, where do I automate, where do I delegate, and how do I communicate that effectively so that it's off of my plate? Because I want my folks doing only CEO activities. And
Okay.
when you do that, ultimately, that's how you build a business I say you can walk away from. And I mean that whether it's for 2 weeks or it's for 2 years, if you can't leave your phone at home, you don't have a business, you have a job. And most of us have built ourselves a kind of a crappy job.
Yeah, for sure. Like it's the old 80-20 rule. We got 80% of the stuff we don't want to do now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I call it picking up the slop. I draw this arc, right, where you hire a project manager, maybe you hire a designer or a bookkeeper, and then it's all the other things that those people either don't want to or can't do that you find yourself doing for 8 hours a day. And it's like, do I really own this thing? Or
Yeah, right.
turn myself into a glorified errand boy? Like, I don't know what
Yeah.
happened.
All right. Well, so you were mentioned that as you're writing your book that you wrote every one of those 50,000 words. So what was that? What was that process like for you?
Oh man, I've said multiple times, I could write a book about writing a book at this point. I set out, I didn't know if one person would buy the book. My
Right.
grandma would be the only one that bought it.
Yeah, of
And
course.
there's crazy stats around book writing. The average author in the world sells less than 200 copies of their book in their lifetime.
Wow.
So do that math and figure out that you make about $6 per book. And then figure out that I put about $50,000 into the launch of the book
All right.
alone.
Yeah.
So we were fortunate. We hit number 1 in 7 categories on Amazon. I was number 1 ahead of some of my heroes, which I screenshot and sent to them. And
That's
all of
awesome.
that was cool.
Yeah.
But you have to have another reason for doing it. We talk about your why a lot, both in the book with the waves method and some of the things that are inside of it. But there has to be a reason you're doing it that's not money.
Yeah.
And for me, it was, going back to reclaiming your time. The subtitle is Peace, Prosperity, and the Courage to Change Course in Life and Business.
Nice.
And that's been my superpower. If something's not working, being able to turn on a 180 and go, all right, we got to go another direction.
Yep.
And having the courage to do that. Because I think a lot of us know that we need to change, but we don't know how. We don't have the support. And the book gives you the tools to build those things from the inside out. So when I was writing the book, when it launched, a lot of people asked did you use AI? And they ask because there's dozens of crap books that come out now, especially that you can self-publish, and we all see them right on
Sure.
Amazon. You'll see somebody, I'm an author, and it's a 38-page thing that says delve into 300 times because they had Chat GPT write it.
Yep.
And I don't know if it's a compliment or it's a detracting statement when somebody asks if you used AI to write your book, but no, I wrote every one of those 50,000 words myself through dozens of revisions, and actually gave a keynote in Austin last fall about the difference between how you can tell. There's these subtle cues where you can tell that something was done with AI, and I think that without going in too far into the weeds there, it's the difference between information and inspiration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. I think I keep calling it the creative human spark, right? Like what you're describing, and the reason why you write the book is not to make money. Statistically, you're not going to make a penny out of it, right? But you want to give birth to this idea that you have. You want to delve deeply into it, and you want to give your interpretation of the world. And obviously, the GPTs don't have that level of inspiration yet.
Yeah, yet being the operative word, right?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the $50,000 you spent promoting it. What were some of the ways that you promoted it, and what worked the best for you?
Oh man, I was in Austria the night before launch, and I remember I was walking around a gnome garden. It's very vivid in my mind. There's a castle, and there's a gnome garden with giant 6-foot tall concrete gnomes every 10 feet. And I recorded a video that I put on LinkedIn and Instagram, etc. And I just said, I was exhausted. I mean, I was putting in 18-hour days leading up to the launch. And I just remember saying, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I know I gave it my all.
Right.
And ultimately, that's all any of us can do, certainly as entrepreneurs and as business people. And I coached sports for a long time, and I coached baseball. And I would tell the boys every season, we're going to win games, we're going to lose games. Sometimes you're lucky. Sometimes the other team just sucks.
Right.
But if you show up every day at practice, if you show up every game and really give it everything you've got, more times than not, we're going to have more points on the board than the other team. And that's how I felt going into this launch. I hired a company to help me. Yep. Which was Amber Villauer and NG and her team, which are great folks. I recommend them to anyone. But a lot of the work, once you're on the inside of it, you realize comes down to, it's a lot of interviews, it's a lot of podcasts, it's a lot of reaching out to, hey, we were 6 years old and used to ride bikes. Remember, it's right. It's reaching out to everybody to get that initial push. Because ultimately, that's what, back to AI, that's what feeds the algorithm and shows it to the strangers of the world. So,
yeah. Well, what keeps you motivated? What is your existential purpose in the hours of darkness?
So if you've ever come to milliondollarflipflops.com or looked at anything we do, like the book, the little meager money we do make from the book, all of it gets donated. We donate 100% of our profits to our foundation, which is called Send a Student Leader Abroad. And we're partnered with EF Tours. If you're not familiar with EF, think middle school kids that go to Europe during a summer break. Mm-hmm. They're I think $7 billion company. They've got 30,000 employees, but we've partnered with them through our foundation. And my goal, and I still always call it the second half of my life, is to send 1 million kids abroad. And these are kids that they have the grit and the determination and the grind, but they're not going to be able to afford to go on a trip like that.
Yeah.
And I believe that travel, certainly international travel, it teaches you empathy and compassion, and it really ultimately, Emanuel, teaches you that there's no them, there's only us. We really are one big human family. And when you visit other parts of the world and you're able to see, all they want is a roof over their head and a warm meal, and they want their kids to do better than they did. And, we all want the same stuff. And the younger that you can learn that, I think the better off we all are, just as that's my existential goal, right? Is to introduce that to kids who couldn't afford that trip, who are going to take those stories back to a community that might not be having those discussions. Because I was that kid that couldn't afford that trip, and my mom spent money she didn't have, and I can hear her and my dad screaming at each other about sending me on that trip in 7th grade. But ultimately, it changed my trajectory as a human being.
Well, that's a beautiful take on it, and I applaud the work that you're doing to help change lives and change the world. That's pretty amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, what's next for what you got going on, Rodric? What's your next project?
Well, I'm writing another book, which has actually nothing to do with business, that I won't even tell you about it, but I'm kind of knee deep in that.
Yeah.
And, I work with 10 to 12 individual clients at a time, and that's my juice. We do a lot of free content. We do a lot of free workshops and everything around reclaiming your time, and just kind of reclaiming your time, sanity, and profits is what we say as a business owner. So I enjoy that work. That's the fire for me. And then it allows me to hang out in the mountains, and I work on hot rods a lot and do woodworking and, try to live that semi-retired life after selling the last business.
All right. Well, that's inspirational. I love that. And if people want to get together and have a conversation with you, how do they catch up with you?
I'm super easy to find them at $1 Million Flip Flops on every channel, or you can go to $1milliondollarflipflops.com. And then I have a podcast you're on as well, the $1 Million Flip Flops podcast. Everything's the same name. So Google $1 Million Flip Flops and you'll find me in some Gucci sandals and probably an HGTV show.
All right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time this morning to check in with me, and thank you for the insight that you brought around reclaiming time.
Yeah. Thank you, buddy. Thanks for having me. We'll have to do it again.
All right. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Marketing in the Age of AI. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss a future episode. Your copy of Authentic Marketing in the Age of AI is available at Amazon.com or EmanuelRose.com. You can also connect with Emanuel on LinkedIn. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.